Chris Cornell, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Brent, for having me. I looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man. Like we were saying offline, or I was saying offline before we started recording. Like I'm really surprised we haven't talked to each other more on X. Like we know like the same people, right? I was obviously just watching your stream with Zach Strength. I've been following him for a long time. During the stream, he called out my buddy Marco from Independence Arc Farm. He was on like 3 days ago, so his episode's coming out soon. Just yesterday, I had Dr. Ovadia on. So like,
Well,
well, I'm sure you're perfectly aware of who he is. um, so with that said, why don't you give a quick introduction for the folks in my audience who might not know who you are and what you do and what you're about?
well, yeah, I'm a guy. I'm 60 years old, and I've got a little bit of a transformational health story that really began almost 10 years ago, when at the age of 51, I was weighing 278 pounds. That I've talked often about the fact that I was at my mother's house visiting her, and I went into the bathroom and saw a scale there, and I stepped on the scale and saw the numbers 278 looking up at me, and I was, really, it wasn't a pleasing moment in my life. I really had been blocking the possibility that I could, that I could possibly weigh that much. I was rationalizing I probably weighed a little more than 250, and so I kind of knew I had to do something, but I had struggled for years on and off with carrying around excess weight, and sometimes I would weigh more than others, but it was really going in the wrong direction at that point. So it wasn't until about 7 years ago, at the age of 53, when I found the low carb way of eating after a doctor friend recommended a book by Gary Taubes, Why We Get Fat. And I took that book in the less than 2 days, um, and it really made sense to me. And it was the first time ever that I started a so-called diet with optimism. And 7 years later, that optimism not once has faded. I've had little miscues, little going off the rail for a day, but over 7 years, it's been essentially all good things in the way of lifestyle. I mean, really, one change has led to another, and subsequently, after losing 80 pounds sustainably, I started taking other aspects of my health and fitness more seriously and with more purpose. And I have been, it's become a very important part of my life, to the extent where over the last year I went through some rather extensive training to become a health coach. And also I had gotten my certification as a metabolic health practitioner from the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. Then I went through the Primal Health Institute Master Coach Program, and now I am a health coach with the Ovadia Heart Health Telemedicine practice. So those are just a few of the highlights, and I'm happy to go into details of any and all aspects of my journey.
Yeah, awesome. That is so good to hear, and it's really inspired a lot of people. I know. I watch your feed on X, and I've been one of those people. If you're not aware, I started a similar type of health journey, but I was in the 290s, man. Like I was a distance runner my whole life, and somehow it was just one of those days. And if you look at my pinned tweet, it's the picture of me where I literally it was like, remember, like it's yesterday, December 27th of last year, not this previous one, but it's been over a year now. And I just said, screw this. I took my shirt off and I took a picture. I said, this is where I'm at, Twitter. And let's go. And I started carnivore January, and really have been doing that low carb thing since then. And it's been great. I got 72 pounds down now. So it's a similar range as you, and have been keeping it off. It's fluctuated a little bit. It's been, not like you said, it's not always a straight line. There's always like a little hiccup here and there. But overall, boy, doing this, keto, low carb, carnivore, whatever you want to call it, type of thing, it really seems to make it easy. It's not something I struggle with anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, congratulations, first of all, on your accomplishment. I mean, it's
Thank
it's a
you.
victory for any of us to go from not being healthy, not having a good body composition, and knowing that we're putting our future at risk. And in addition, you know, we don't have control over our longevity as much as we would like, but you have a lot of control about your quality of life while you're here, and you can do things that are going to improve your chances for a longer life. And so nothing is certain. But as far as I'm concerned, I went through a really bad cancer scare 6 years ago, and it changed my perspective, and it made me consciously appreciate every day that I get to wake up and go through this world that has got so many amazing things and the people that are in it. And so when you have that gratitude, you start thinking more about what you can do today rather than put things off and make decisions that are less optimal for your health and wellness.
Whoa, that's that's really rough, man. My buddy Vinny Tortorich went through a similar cancer thing, and it's when you talk to the people that have gone through that, it's just the same story. Is you have all these problems in your life, and then you get sick, and you got one problem, right? Like it completely sharpens your focus, and you don't think about much else other than getting better.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be underestimating or underputting it if I didn't say that it completely changed my life. I can still remember the day that I was sitting in the doctor's office and with my wife, and he had looked at some scans after I had been diagnosed. So I was in there getting his overview on my prognosis, and I had some optimism when I walked into that doctor's office, and he said something to the effect of, "We looked at the scans of your chest, and we saw it was lighting up. Um, if the cancer in your head and neck um, has spread to your chest, there's really nothing we can do."
Mm.
And um, we went, we walked out of that, and not another word was said by my wife and I. We walked out of that office, walked to the car, silent. In the first 15 minutes of our drive home, not a word. There was nothing that could be said. And then I gathered my thoughts. We started talking, and we collected ourselves. And my wife is a big Googler, much to the dismay of some doctors. She finds out every freaking fact that is out there, and together we went through everything. We went down to the city, got my chest, X-rayed, and ultimately they found out that I had another condition called sarcoidosis, which fortunately for me meant that the lighting up in my chest was not due to metastasized cancer. But it was a several days, maybe like a week or more, where I really thought that there was a good chance that my time here was very finite, like short amount, and it just even in that time, I accepted the fact that I had no control, and I was going to make the best of what I had left regardless. And I promised myself that I would never take another day for granted. So I try my hardest to live up to that.
Man, I can't imagine what that's like, and I'm a little bit scared too because I've got some risk. Obviously, I think you're trained in this stuff. Metabolic dysfunction typically leads to cancer in a lot of cases or contributes to it. Cancer seems to thrive on sugar, so if you've had a very refined carbohydrate type of diet and you got a bunch of adipose tissue, particularly in your abdomen, your visceral fat, it seems to be correlated pretty tightly with incidences of cancer. And for me, I had a really terrible childhood, and if you look at the Kaiser Permanente ACEs study, like that is tightly correlated with cancers too. So I have a few things that are stacked against me, and I definitely worry. So I can't imagine what that must have been like to get that news. What did you feel like when you heard that? Like that must be completely overwhelming.
Um, I mean, it. I, I had been. This is an interesting little story. A good friend of mine, her house had essentially burned almost to the ground. The bricks were still up, but the inside of the house was gutted. We were able to go in there and get stuff out. This was I was doing that the day after I had surgery on my neck to take the lump out, and I was working helping my friend get her belongings out of the house, and that right there gave me some perspective on human suffering and everything, and I was carting some stuff out of this house, trying to put it in places in the yard so that it would dry because it had been all the stuff that had survived was all wet from fire hoses and everything. And I had a huge set of stitches on my neck from the surgery that I had gone through, and it was all covered with soot and everything. Wasn't really good. And all of a sudden, I heard a noise out front, um, and a minute or two later, it sounded like a collision of some sort. And a minute or two later, one of the other guys that was helping came up and said, "Hey, Chris, we need you out front." I went out front, and my car had been sideswiped by a garbage truck. Okay, so
Oh, man.
I went into the car to get my insurance out, and my phone rings, and it's my doctor on the phone while I'm still pulling out the stuff to do the police work for my car. And he says, "Chris, I got some bad news for you. You've got cancer." So that was my day. Um,
Wow.
and and I remember like various times during the ordeal, time just completely stood still. Um, Sound vanished. I was like alone in my own world. At one point, I was at a high school football game. The next day, I guess it was, and I remember like not even being able to hear the crowd noise. I was just like in my own little world. Anyway, I'm rambling, but
No, no,
it
that
it
sounds exactly like dissociation. Like that's
it
classic dissociation.
it but I was thinking, and I can honestly say that, and I already alluded to this before, but like it just brought home the reality that none of us are going to last forever. It's going to come to an end, and the only thing we have some control over is what we do while we're here, and and there are certain things that can make that experience better for ourselves, for the people that we love, that we care about. um, we can do things that make the world a better place. We can help other people with their health and nutrition, like what you're doing with this podcast. And you mentioned like Vinny Tortorich, who I've talked to him on his podcast. It's like this stuff that we're doing is making a difference, and you can choose to do that, or you can choose to sit on the couch and eat Doritos. And I'm not an extremist, and I know that we're not always chasing the perfect things, but you make conscious decisions and you live your life in a way that has as much good stuff in it as you can for yourself and the people that you care about.
Yeah, that's really well said, man. And I think far too few people spend the time focusing on that until they have to, right? When you get a diagnosis or someone in your family does, and then everyone starts to pull together. But we're sort of not realizing how precious every day is, and people are spending it doom scrolling and eating a bunch of bullshit on the couch and just wasting their life. And it's a precious thing, man. And you never know when your card's going to get pulled. It could be tomorrow getting hit by a bus, or it could be when you're 100. You don't know. That's the interesting thing about life is we all have this sort of set point in our head. Oh, I'm going to die sometime way in the future. I'm going to be, I don't know, 80, 90, 100, whatever it's going to be. But none of us has any control over this. It could be tomorrow for any of us.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I get up early, a lot more often than I used to. I've watched a lot more sunrises over the last 5 or 6 years. I just got to the 6 year mark on my cancer, so I was actually just down at the cancer center yesterday, or Monday, and I'm essentially out of the program now. I'm cancer free according to the MSK people, and I think I might have to go back one more time next year if all looks good. I'm kind of done. An interesting thing I was just thinking about though is how when you're diagnosed with cancer, you go sit in the office with the doctor and they lay out a protocol. If you're fortunate enough to have good medical care, which I don't take that for granted either, because not everybody has access to the same doctors and whatever that I have. I have a relatively good insurance plan, and it's still, there's a lot of aspects of our medical system that are broken, for sure. But when you go to the cancer center, they lay out a program, and there's no like, you have cancer, and they tell you that you're going to die if you don't get the treatment. And they lay out a rather inconvenient protocol that involves, for me, like 7 weeks of daily 1 hour each way trips to the place to get strapped down onto a board so that they could shoot radiation into my neck, over and over again until my throat is like bleeding, and taking chemotherapy, which completely killed my sense of taste. And yet I got in the car and I did that over and over again, and I got the result that I was looking for. I ultimately, you know, my cancer was under control and eliminated. But when somebody has type 2 diabetes, or pre-diabetes, you go to the doctor, and at best, at least for me, they tell you, Chris, you're 70 pounds overweight. The advice is like, you've got to lose some weight, and then you leave 3 minutes later. Like, um, and I just wonder if, there was never a question in my mind about the cancer treatment. Certainly, if it had been made apparent to me that the what I was doing to my body with the junk food I was eating and the 80 extra pounds I was carrying, um, and a plan was laid out to bring that under control, um, I think I would have been inclined to take it more seriously rather than just be told, hey, you got to lose some weight. And I understand that the doctors, there's not a system where the doctor has the time to get you on a plan that is sustainable and workable. It's the model is broken. But at any rate, I'm a big believer that we all have a lot more potential and a lot more power to take control, but a lot of us have no idea what the heck we're supposed to do. And for me, I tried losing weight through calorie restriction, through cutting fat out of my diet. I actually cut red meat out of my diet for
Jeez.
over 10 years. Um, at one point, I had to go to the doctor because I was feeling like I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. I thought I was dying, and it turned out I had almost zero B12. Um, like, clearly we know how that happens, but I didn't know how that happened at the time. Nobody told me. Everybody told me don't eat meat, and it's more healthy, and and cut fat out of your diet. So that's that's where I was, and things have certainly gotten a lot better.
Well, let's go back even further. So I'm sort of curious in retrospect how you got there. Like I know how it happened for me, and I see a lot of people where they're ending up in that place, right? So how do you think you got there? Do you have any insight, or do you spend any time ruminating on kind of like what led you to that oh shit moment where it was like, hey, my scales showing me this, and I'm not happy?
How I got to be 278 pounds?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I um, I was using food as a something to make me just feel better. At one point, I had a retail business for 16 years, um, long hours. Some aspects of the job, of the business that I was running, involved, uh, when I had work to do, and it was just piling up. Sometimes I'd work late into the night all by myself, to try to catch up. And I would listen to music or talk radio, and I would eat. So there'd be, and I've always enjoyed sugar. People say that nobody gets fat just eating sugar, but essentially, I did. For me, soda like Pepsi and Coke, which are completely fat-free, and clearly they have a few flavors and stuff, but it's essentially carbonated sugar water, and um, a lot of the candy. I did buy into the fat is bad thing. So a lot of the foods that I was eating didn't have any fat in them at all. Twizzlers and Starbursts and hard candies and pretzels. Pretzels were one of my favorite thing. I could eat a whole bag of pretzels. No fat in most pretzels. Um, but you can certainly gain weight. And I'm not saying I never had, when I would really go off the rails, yeah, then I'd eat foods that had fat and carbs. But I didn't understand the importance of protein, how protein can be used as a lever to achieve satiety, to get to the point where you're not um, constantly feeling hunger and cravings. And I've learned that food is not, I'm not going to survive if I use food as a way to achieve happiness or pleasure. It's just a fact. Like I know I've conditioned myself to understand that if I go for that bag of Doritos or the cake or the cookies or whatever, I've got a lot of things that miss somewhat. I used to love eating pie, ice cream, uh, and if I go for that, I'm making a decision to undermine my health. Um, if I go for that one time because it's a special occasion, I can figure out ways to make that work so that I don't have to say no to the birthday cake for a close family member, or if my mom bakes home baked molasses cookies, the same recipe that she made 50 years ago when I was a little kid. I can have a cookie or two and still figure out how to make that work. And I know some people have trouble with that, but if I just reach for those things casually, it just leads me back to the same place, and I'm not going to go there ever again.
Yeah, I've got a similar story, man. Like, I think I was using food to cope too. Like I said, I got the bad childhood. That was always a thing that I used to soothe myself. But when I was so active, it didn't really catch up to me. But had a real bad knee injury and I couldn't run marathons anymore. And so I was like, man, you just don't notice. It's like a slow drip over time, and you don't maybe look at yourself in the mirror regularly enough. You don't weigh yourself enough, and all of a sudden look up one day, and you're like, "Oh, I'm actually getting kind of fat. What's going on?" And then also another thing that really didn't help with me is I lived in Washington at the time. I was living in the suburb of Seattle, and that's when cannabis was legalized, and it was like, oh, like for me, it's like, oh, this is cool. I can use this to help me get to sleep at night. That was my justification. It was true. I slept a little better on it. But then guess what? Then I get a little munchies, and then now you're, intentionally planning to get like some Skittles and like a slushy or something. Like, I mean, it was terrible, and it made it taste so good. It was so much better, and then like it's just like just pouring jet fuel onto the fire, and that it just kept packing the pounds on, and it was a real problem. I think people don't take the cannabis stuff seriously enough. I think we as a society have said, okay, yeah, there was a little hysteria about it. Yeah, maybe it's not so damaging as we thought it was, and yes, there might be some application in the health world for CBD, and like all those things can be true. You can also misuse it, right? Like it can certainly impact your life in a negative way. I mean, my experience, it definitely did.
Yeah, you know, I've started to take more seriously all the choices that I make, and when even with respect to alcohol, um, I've actually seen many lives destroyed by alcohol, so that hasn't ever been a problem of mine. Although I've definitely cut back to almost not at all because I don't see any productive value for me. I'll have a toast at a wedding or something like that, but um, I'm just at the mindset like if it's possibly going to affect my sleep or whatever, I'd just rather not do it. Um, so I was curious. So you said you ran some marathons. How many have you run, and at what part of your life did you get into that?
I don't know how many total. I'd have to look at the medals I've got. I got them in the closet somewhere, but it must be 8, maybe.
Congratulations, that's an awesome achievement. I'm
Well, yes and no. So part of this is tied to my pathology too. So I grew up running cross country in high school. I was actually very good. I got hit by a car when I was a junior in high school, and it ruined my ability to get a scholarship. I actually flew to Sydney, Australia, ran the City to Surf race, which at the time was the largest race in the world. Had cross country coaches at the collegiate level trying to recruit me. That's actually what
mm,
that trip was. And so always been a runner. And at the time, that was the longest race I'd run, which was about, I think, 14 and a half miles. I can't remember how many kilometers it was, but and so it was roughly a half marathon, and I was like, I can run a half, and I can like half marathon. I was like, no big deal. So I was thinking, how much harder can a full be? So I decided to sign up to the Salt Lake Marathon on a whim, and didn't train, not even a step, not one step. I didn't run at all. I probably hadn't run in 3 years. Just walked up the line and ran the thing, and that was the biggest mistake of my life, man. So let me tell you something. got to the halfway mark and I was cruising. The Salt Lake course is very shady on the first half, right? It was early morning. We started like 7 a.m. and it was nice and cool, fast downhill. Then you turn around, you go up Fort Union Boulevard, and it's all concrete. It's like a boulevard, like 4x4 lanes separated, and it's all concrete. And the sun is there's no shade at all. It is just reflecting, and you run the back half uphill. And man, I started to get cramps like I'd never had before. Because before at half, like I would get one glass of water Powerade at the aid station and keep running, right? I didn't have any gels. I didn't have any electrolytes. I'm just drinking what they give me. And I was super dehydrated, super low in electrolytes, and everything started cramping up. And so I basically had to power walk the entire, like I'd say, the last third of the marathon. And I had like a singlet on that had a stitch that was messed up on the left side. It was white, bright white. I'll never forget this. And it started bleeding. And so it
Oh,
looked like I'd been shot, like blood just pouring down this side over here. And I got to the end, and it was like my wife showed up and she brought me two like gallon jugs of Gatorade or something. And I drank both of those things on the way back home. And I didn't pee for like an hour after that. And when I did, it was like coffee color. So I'd rhabdomyolysis. I was in a bad way. My kidneys were on the verge of shutting down. And I was like, oh, you
oh,
know what? Maybe marathons are something that you probably should prepare for. And so I took it quite seriously for the rest of them. And I learned a lot that first one. But yeah, that was my first foray into marathoning. After that, it got much better. I think I PR'd every time after that. Like it was successive PRs the entire way.
what's your best marathon?
I want to say it was 4 hours and 30 minutes or something. I'm not fast. Like this wasn't fast. It was
That's and are you still you got thoughts of doing any additional ones?
yes. And so here's my dumbass again. So do you know Jordan Goldstein at all?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Jordan's been on the show a few times and has convinced me to go up to Indiana this year and do the Prairie on Fire,
Oh, great.
the backyard ultra. So currently in training for that one, and we'll see how that goes.
Well, that's awesome. I got to tell you, I've run one marathon in my life, and it is one of the highlights of my life. If I was asked to, list top 10 moments, I think it would be in there. I got to run it with my wife, across the finish line with my wife. That was after 18 weeks of training in the winter in New York. And some of my best memories of the two of us together are in that training program and finishing the race. It was in Los Angeles. We went out there and ran it with my son, who finished a little more than an hour ahead of us. But I think we managed a 4:38, and and it was just a phenomenal experience of like personal achievement. Hey, I know I could barely go up a couple of flights of stairs just 10 years ago at 51, and now I'm somehow capable of running for over 4 hours, and surrounded by all these other people doing similar activity. It's a great thing. I'm you know I do respect anyone that does a second one. I haven't had the
Yeah.
courage to sign up for a second one yet, although I have. um, I ran another half marathon last October, and I just got my new pair of Brooks running shoes, so
Mm.
I'm getting ready to put another race on the calendar, probably a half marathon. But I wouldn't encourage anyone to get ahead of themselves, but putting some race on the calendar, if you can endure, if you can appreciate running at all, it's a great like personal victory that you can have, that whether it's a 5K or a 10K or whatever. And that's how I progressed, was you know progressing from a 5K, then a faster 5K, then a half. And I love this community that you mentioned Jordan, who I definitely follow on X. um, I had the opportunity to talk to Brady Homer and Zach Bitter. Zach Bitter is a former world record holding 100 miler. Um, and he chatted with me about things that I could do, and it's just amazing, the people will help other people when they have information that can help them. It's amazing how people are willing to share, and that's part of my approach is I recommend that anybody, listening to podcasts for one is a great way to get information. But if you really want to engage with people, you can go on X and respond to their posts and ask questions. And so many people are willing to help out. So it's definitely something that's been an important part of my learning process.
Yeah, yeah, the community is great, and also if you, even if you're not actively running or training or whatever, but maybe just follow some people who are in the space. 'Cause I think that it's encouraging to see some positivity come across the feed. Some people that are holding each other up, encouraging each other, sharing good information. That sometimes that's a gateway drug, man. If you just observe your feed going from I'm screaming about Trump or whoever your favorite political person is or whatever to oh, I got 10% positivity coming across my feed. That's a incremental step in the right direction, I think. Could be a gateway drug to actually, lacing up your shoes or hitting the gym or whatever.
I just remembered the one of the highlights of my 18-week training. I was just thinking about it as I was recalling that winter 2 years ago. It was February, about 3 weeks before the marathon, and we were due to run a 20 miler, and we were going to run it on the Duchess Rail Trail, which is a long, flat, used to be a railroad bed covered over with asphalt. And so we set out on our run, and it was a little chilly, but clear and dry. And we got about 2 miles into this 20-mile run, and all of a sudden the skies opened up with snow. And we got to the 7 mile mark, and there was about an inch and a half of snow on the ground, and it just got worse. And we thought so many times on that run that we were going to quit, that we were going to die, no one was going to find us, and just somehow we finished. And that right there was like one of my highlight days ever, just to finish running 20 miles in a blizzard. It was like, man, if you can do that, running a marathon on a nice day in Los Angeles was a piece of cake after that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Also, I think there's something valuable about going through something difficult like that with another human being, man. It bonds you together in a way that's hard to describe.
Oh, and I should also mention, like after my cancer treatments, I lost a lot of muscle mass, a lot of my conditioning, and we went out. My wife was going for a run, and she said, "Hey, do you want to go for a run?" This is about after 2 weeks after I finished chemo, and I was still like just melded into the couch, not doing anything, feeling like absolute crap. And I almost said no, and then I actually thought to myself, I gotta go. I gotta give this a try. And that day, I went out and I ran. I got to the mile mark, the 1 mile mark, and I couldn't go any further. That's how much strength I had. And I told my wife to just keep running, and it was a there and back. She would pass me on the way back, and I said, we'll both get to the car at the same time. And but I managed to go back like walking the mile back to the car. And after that day, I vowed that barring some, real serious scheduling conflict or something, that I would never turn down a run uh, with my wife or a family member. If I had the opportunity to do that, I would never choose to stay on the couch. And I've kept that promise to myself, and that's I got to give my wife credit for getting me up off the couch and sort of picking me up and helping me get back on my feet after that whole cancer thing.
Yeah, that reminds me, man. Like you tweeted or retweeted something from one of our mutual friends, Dr. Edward Perrin. He's been on the show before, and he said, "Who's the most motivating person you met in your life? What was the secret sauce they taught?" And you said, "I honestly don't understand why more people don't ask questions like this every day." So I'm going to ask you that, man. Like, how would you answer that question?
Well, you know what? I saw that post today, and I realized that questions like that are what has driven my success. Because
Mm.
I I mean, I think I'm relatively smart, but I'm certainly not the most educated person when it comes to science, fitness, and so forth. But asking questions like that. So to get to your question, when I saw that post, I thought about it, and I was realizing that I don't know if I could give a single answer. I mean, I just mentioned my wife, who's been very supportive and motivating, and I mean, when someone helps get you through something like cancer, that's a pretty momentous part of one's life. So I guess I'm calling her out for all the support she's given me. I, I'm surrounded. I think James Clear wrote something to the effect. He's got a quote that's something to the effect of, um, if you want to achieve things, surround yourself with other people who are achieving those things. Surround yourself with people that are reaching higher, and um, you know, that your level will rise by the people you surround yourself with. And I think that honestly, the people that I surround myself with include so many incredibly motivating people that I, I, I think most people probably don't have that in their lives. I'm guessing that you do because of the people that you interview on your podcast and the people that you follow on X. But I go out of my way you know, to meet people like you, to meet people like, like Zach Strength, Zach Bitter, people in the resistance training world, doctors who like Dr. Ovadia. The list is endless. I could talk for 10 minutes. And I've also had, part of my job is I've worked in digital marketing and as a writer for ever since I got rid of my retail business more than like 15 years ago. I've gotten the chance to interview, scores of experts and doctors and write articles. Just being surrounded by those people has been incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great thing about social media if you use it correctly, is you can surround yourself with a whole tribe of people that are motivating in different ways because everyone's got their own persona and everyone's got their own perspective, their own approach. And I think that it is really, really valuable to get that because in the real world, historically, human beings had a really small tribe. We weren't connected with people the way we are now, and we can be connected with the best of people or the worst of people anywhere in the world because of social media. And I really lament the way that social media is oftentimes used to just become this negative spiral to the bottom where it could be so positive. Like to your point, like this has completely enriched my life, not only interacting with people on X the way I do, but meeting them oftentimes in person, developing relationships with people. And that's just something that's added so much value to my life. I can hardly describe it.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and have had the good fortune. I mean, you talked about the fact that you might go run a race in Indiana with a tribe
Mhm.
of guys that are like-minded. I've just kind of found myself. I've gone to symposium for metabolic health. I think I've been to like six or seven of them over the last 7 years, and I've met not dozens, but maybe hundreds of people that I've interacted with on X. Doctors, lay people trying to improve their health, and it's been just an amazing experience. And so, yeah, I think that social media does get a bad rap for all the negativity, but just like anything else, we get to make our own choices. You can unfollow people that are not productive for you, just like you can do in real life. You don't have to go out to dinner with someone who's toxic or, uh, is going to bring you down. You can make your own choices, and it's really up to you. Just like you choose what you're going to eat. I mean, you can choose who you're going to hang out with and who you're going to learn from. And I also try to I learn lots, but as I mentioned before, I'm a health coach. I also write a weekly newsletter that for me is pretty amazing. I have 1,600 subscribers, and I try my best to write an email every single week and have it go out Sunday morning. And I get people writing me suggestions, advice, criticism, um, comments on what I've written, and it keeps me sharper. It keeps me involved, and it makes me think. Um, so I, you know, I'll test out my ideas via the email. So I'm just immersed in it, uh, you know, all the time.
So I was watching you run with the with the kettlebell, right? Um, that was number one, awesome to see, and also a little bit hilarious. But there was something you mentioned about it, which is people are coming out of the woodwork trying to feign care about your personal safety. What's up with that phenomenon, man? It seems like, and I think you alluded to it on X, where you're like, hey, like nobody really gave a shit when I was stuffing my face with this garbage and doing things that were clearly far more dangerous than you know what I'm saying, right? There's
I
this
do.
thing where people they focus on like, oh, now I'm really concerned about your well-being. How dare you, sir? Don't you
That's
know what this is doing? And then at the same time, like completely, there was not a peep, and that was in my life as well. People around me, people who cared about me, not a word until you start eating a different diet and doing these things. Everyone says, oh my God, that's extreme.
Yeah, that's a brilliant observation, um, and yeah, and I'm sure a little bit of it has to do with the fact that, you know, I have more followers now than I did when I was stuffing my face with, you know, bagels and cake and cookies and whatever, and some of that stuff. You know, early in social media, I was posting it on social media. You know, like my breakfast, which was horrendous, and you know, no one ever complained about that though. But yeah, that kettlebell thing. First of all, that was wild. I had been meaning. I had heard the podcast that Andrew Huberman did with Pavel. I think his last name is pronounced Susaline. You know, he's a legendary figure in the weightlifting kettlebell community, and you know, he's got some really interesting thoughts. And he talked about the kettlebell mile, which I had been familiar with, and I had done a quarter mile with a 60-pound weight on a track about 3 years ago. And I know I did a 2 minute and 21 second quarter mile, which was brutal. I ran about as fast as I could with the weight, and it was 60 pounds, which is a little more than the official kettlebell mile because I only had two 30-pound weights that I strapped together in a crude fashion. But um, the recent episode with Pavel and Huberman um, made me decide to make a to give it a shot. And so I bought a handle for my 50-pound kettlebell, and I've got the regulation weight at least with a kettlebell handle. And I went out in front of my house, and I had my daughter videotape, and I ran up and down my street to give it my first attempt. And yes, I did get a good. Well, Andrew Huberman retweeted it, so
I saw that. What is it like? Father, sorry to distract you, but what was it like being retweeted by Andrew Huberman?
well, that's fascinating. I mean, it's kind of fun to talk about. I my daughter did the video, and it was, you know, I posted it. It was 21 seconds of video, and I ran for a lot longer than that. But you know, I got the idea that I could feel how hard it's going to be to get back up to a mile. I'm sure my form was not perfect to say the least, but my running form, even without a kettlebell, is far from perfect. But the tweet kind of did take off even before Andrew got involved. There, you know, it was an engaging tweet, and my wife and I went out shopping, and she was in the passenger seat, and she was checking the Twitter, and all of a sudden, we had we were talking about the podcast and the fact that Huberman had initially responded with a simple reply, which, you know, got some attention, but so the tweet was doing well, and my wife's a big fan, and she's of the whole social media thing. You know, she's not that active herself, but she's very supportive. And so we're driving down a road doing some shopping. We're on the way to Sam's Club to buy some groceries, and all of a sudden she said, "You are not going to believe this," and I was like, "No." And she said, "Yes, Andrew Huberman just quote tweeted your tweet." So it's nearing a million views, and
Wow.
the video that my daughter took has well over 200,000 you know, watches or views, and so it was kind of insane. And the comments from some of these expert runners and expert doctors that, you know, this is a recipe for disaster. You're going to destroy your spine. You're this, you're that, or whatever. And you know, first of all, I'm not advising anybody to do this. Um, just like I don't advise anybody to copy what I eat. I do give some suggestions on how a person can improve aspects of their life by N=1 experimentation and finding what works best for them. But sure, there's some risk involved with running with a 50-pound kettlebell, 53 pounds to be exact. But it's a decision that I made. You know, I'm I'm relatively fit. I do a lot of resistance training. I'm not going to do the whole mile on my first day out, and if I start feeling some pain or some aggravation, I'll back off. But I'm not particularly concerned with suffering some kind of a injury from. I mean, I've run through airports with 53 pounds of luggage in one hand, and it's not always fun, but nobody ever told me that I should stop running because I'm going to get hurt. And some of these people are so-called experts who think that their way is the one and only best way. I should also point out that I had at least as many doctors, MDs, message me privately and in the Twitter feed saying, kudos to you for giving it a shot. Please be safe, but I think what you're doing is excellent. And I think everyone should make, the basic message is, make choices based on your own reward and risk, and don't let anyone else think for you. And that's my philosophy to begin with.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're right. I think it just is one of those things that people are either looking for clout, or people are. I mean, I think there's a bunch of reasons why people respond the way they do. But I think you called out in your tweet somewhere. I don't remember exactly what it is, not on the top of my head, but I was carrying around this much adipose tissue, like
Oh, well,
permanently. You know?
yeah, 80 pounds, 80 pounds. And when I would go out and run at 275 pounds, um, that was, without being in any kind of condition, a 1 mile run had to be more dangerous than me now today. Much stronger, much fitter, and much more knowledgeable about my body. Um, is it possible that I could get hurt? Sure, but you know, earlier last fall, I went out doing some hill sprints with my daughter, and I, suffered a hamstring strain just running up the hill. Um, is sprinting dangerous? Can you get hurt sprinting? Sure, but should we tell everybody don't sprint because you could pull a hamstring? I mean, like, come on, it's you got to make your own choices and use your own common sense.
Yeah, dude. After 50, it's like you can hurt yourself rolling out of bed in the morning wrong. Like, come on, man.
I should also point out that when I was in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I would throw my back out routinely, mostly because of my inactivity. And when I would go to do something, my lower back would, have spasms, and there were times when I'd be laid out, unable to get off the floor for days. And this was started even in my 20s. I can remember living in an apartment. I was by myself, and I had my sister drop by with a pizza, and she put it on the floor, and that's where I ate it because I was literally incapacitated, and you know, pretty sad what I chose to eat, but it was that's the way life was, and so my back hasn't given me an issue in 7 years. Um, and I'm knocking on wood that this kettlebell thing doesn't change that, but I have every confidence that it'll be fine.
Yeah, pretty sure you can be fine, dude. Uh, we get a little bit short on time, so I wanted to, let you give some advice to people, man. Let's say that I'm just some average Joe, middle-aged dude that's been sedentary, been putting on the weight and stuff, and I'm watching this episode, and I'm like, you know what? I'm really vibing with what Chris is saying, and I'd like to be like Chris. What would you tell them in 10 minutes or so? What advice would you give to sort of motivate and encourage and inform somebody with just enough knowledge to get going?
Yeah, well, it's a question that comes up a lot, and I love that you ask it because that's the kind of question that I ask whenever I talk to a doctor or a fitness person. And the reason I ask is because I want to learn. I want to learn more, and it's a constant quest. I have a few little pieces of advice. One, if you're struggling with obesity, in my experience, learning how to control your satiety is really, really important. If you can there's a lot of reasons people eat, and some people eat out of boredom, out of stress, or whatever. But it's almost impossible to control the calories that you're taking in if you can't control satiety, because your body is basically crying out for food 24/7, and it's your willpower, but eternally against those cravings. And for me, learning about how to find the right macro combination and what specific foods provide the best satiety. For me, I think if you follow my feed, you'll see that I post a lot of bunless cheeseburgers in various configurations. That, for whatever reason, um, is like the food that most reliably and predictably provides me with satiety. I mix it up with different fixings, sometimes mushrooms, onions, uh, you know, lettuce, tomato, mustard. I use a lot of mustard and some hot sauce. Sometimes guacamole, sometimes fried egg, sometimes bacon. But the bunless cheddar burger is my go-to. I think everybody should have an understanding as to what a couple of meals look like that provide them with reliable satiety. And I would start with, avoiding sugar, refined carbs. I've eliminated grains and seed oils. And then if you go with real whole foods and then experiment and try to find foods that give you great satiety, that will be a huge step in your journey. Um, and I do understand that there's individuality and everybody's got to find what works best for them. But if you're willing to experiment, take notes and observe, you can figure that out. And I work with people professionally, on doing things just like that, figuring out what levers to pull to try to get to what works best for them. And then with respect to fitness, activity, exercise, cardio, resistance training, I think it's important for everybody to protect and build their muscles. So resistance training is not really optional in my opinion. It's like a requirement if you want to have a good, healthy, uh, long health span with a good quality of life. You've got to build muscle. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, but at least 2 or 3 times a week with some intensity. Minimum 15 minutes a session. But that's up to you if you can figure out ways to enjoy it, like I do. The gym is kind of fun. So, and that hits on an aspect that I think is really important: figuring out ways to make these activities enjoyable, because it's not a short-term thing to get to a destination. It's the rest of your life. So if you can enjoy weightlifting, whether it's with bands, body weight, dumbbells, barbells, and then the same thing with some sort of uh, walking, running, cycling, swimming, whatever it is, there's ways to make it more fun. I mean, go walk with a friend, run with a friend, um, and if you can make it enjoyable, there's way greater chance that you're going to stick with it. Sometimes publicly posting about things gives you a little extra motivation, makes it a little more rewarding. I mean, certainly, when I ran the marathon, there were people tweeting while I was in the corral at 6 in the morning. It was still dark at Dodger Stadium. People were tweeting to me, and I got a kick out of that. I actually I posted one video at the halfway mark on the marathon, and it's anyway. That's my 5-minute ramble on advice to those looking to make improvements in their life.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for that. What about getting started with something like carnivore? Like, what's your view on that? Do you have any opinions?
Well, I, I do appreciate the value of meat as a food in a well-formulated low-carb diet. I've never been carnivore. They would kick me out because I eat green vegetables.
Oh, you heretic! You heretic!
Um, I do think that I think it's silly to argue with anyone else's approach. Long ago, I decided that I get along fine with people that are plant-based, and a lot of the doctors I respect. I know, Dr. Ovadia wrote a book, Stay Off My Operating Table, and he follows a carnivore diet, but he's very open-minded about patients and other people who may have a different approach. And he basically says if you're going to go plant-based, be sure that you're eating real, whole, single ingredient foods primarily, and then you need to supplement to get the nutrients that you need. But if that's your desire for whatever reason, like why should we attack someone else for their views as long as they're not pushing their views down your throat? And I've seen people succeed. I don't know anybody that's on a vegan diet per se, but I know people that are on much more plant-based diets who are doing just great. But eliminating the foods that are pushing you away from your goals. So with respect to carnivore, I mean, um, I find that some of the foods that like onions and peppers I include because of taste. I
Mm.
mean, it's not a calorie thing. It's not like I'm trying to get energy from onions. It's just that the taste of garlic and other seasonings and stuff, it's just something that I enjoy, and I definitely want to enjoy my food. And honestly, if I had a endless supply of ribeyes and I could afford to eat ribeyes, morning, noon, and night, um, who knows? Maybe I'd give it a try. I don't. I like cheeseburgers a lot, but um, I like to mix it up a little bit, and but I don't. I think that carnivore. It doesn't seem like it would be a difficult diet to stick to if as long as you have a well-stocked refrigerator, and I don't really see any issues with it in terms of nutritional value or anything like that. So um, the more the more people doing low carb, well, you know what? The more people finding any way that really hits their health the way they want, the better. And the things that I think most successful diets have in common is um, they minimize a lot of the hyper palatable, hyper processed garbage that you find in the center of your supermarket and the center of your Sam's Club or your Costco. Just pallets of um, very um, protein inadequate foods with high amounts of processed carbs and fats.
Yeah, I kind of take a similar approach. I'm not carnivore either, by the way, but I what I was talking about is getting started with carnivore because like that helped me out so much. Number one with satiety, right? Because when you start a diet, everyone always worries like, oh, am I gonna be hungry all the time? And then what diet am I following? And like, what do I have to do these calorie trackers? And do I have to like take care? Like for me, I didn't measure shit. I made sure that I had, steak and eggs and ground beef and all these things, bacon, eggs, is all in the fridge, ready to go. And I ate when I was hungry, and I ate it until I was full. And then I realized that like this is actually really, this is actually very satiating, and I didn't have to. I noticed I wasn't eating as much as I thought I was going to on it, and it made life so much simpler for me because I didn't have to think at all about it. It was just so damn simple. So for me, there was a lot of value in just starting that way, and also just getting over that, society pounding in your head that red meat is terrible and you're going to catch a cholesterol and you're going to have a heart attack. Like just getting past some of that. I think it was really helpful for me just to drive that home that like, oh shit, I've lost like 30 pounds in a month eating, as much as I want to, and I didn't die.
Well, I know we're running out of time, but I will say that you make an excellent point there. The if What you basically just described is a carnivore diet is a very simple rule to follow.
Mm.
It's like a one rule system that solves all of your weight loss problems for a lot of people, and there's no questions. I mean, it's either meat or it's not. So that is excellent, and I've been following a five rule system for the last like 7 years. And my rules are very basic. It's a little more complicated than carnivore, but I don't eat after 10 o'clock or after 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. I don't eat before 10:30 a.m. I hit 200 grams of protein per day, under 90 carbs per day, and I minimize sugar, refined carbs, processed carbs, and seed oils. and I always keep highly satiating foods on hand. So that's my rules. I can recite them pretty well without any effort, and um, I think that one way or another, everybody needs a set of very simple rules that they can follow where they don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about should I put this in my mouth or should I not. It's like you know what you got to do and just do it.
For sure. And so I think I will add one more tip to this, which is you call it, the protein intake. I think people really need to understand how much protein they absolutely need to have, particularly as you age. I think we all know that we start losing muscle mass more and more as we age. We need more protein as we get older, not less. And so always keep that in mind. If you're going to track any macro, I would say track your protein, because muscle protein synthesis requires two things. It requires adequate protein intake and it requires resistance training. So do those things.
What is your protein target, Brent?
I'm about 1.5 grams per pound of body weight.
Okay. I hit 200 a day, so and I'm about a little over 200 pounds. So I agree with you. It's that was foundational in my journey. I was probably consuming half that amount for years and years and years, and there was no way I was ever going to find success without trial and error finding my protein target.
You got it. Well, hey, we're right at time here, so I'm going to let you go. But man, tell everyone, if they don't know where to find you already, where they can find you online.
Yeah, I encourage people to look me up on X. I'm at Biggest Comeback. And then if you're interested in getting my email, the link is in the bio of my X account. And it's easy to sign up, and I send one email a week, and happy to engage with people as a back and forth after each email. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Yeah, don't Google him, guys. You're just gonna find the Soundgarden dude. He's not the Soundgarden dude.
I'll give you a tip though. If you want to Google me, put my middle initial S in there, and you will find me. And one little trivia point: I met the late Chris Cornell about 3 months before he died. I worked on a
Oh,
film project that he did the music for, and we met in a restaurant at the opening of the film. We had a party afterwards, and so I he was a real nice guy. I got a picture with him, and then unfortunately he passed away shortly thereafter.
yeah, boy, that's sure sad. But because cool, you got to meet him. He's one of my heroes. I'm a Seattle dude originally, so
Oh, you mentioned that.
yeah, yeah. So that's where my kids grew up and everything. I'm in Nashville now, but yeah, that's the whole scene during that time was well, part of my core memories. But anyway, hey, thanks for stopping by, man. Really appreciate you coming in and chatting with me, and we'll talk later.
Hey, thanks, Brent. This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, sir.